What's up guys, this is YeahBuoy. I'm going to review this Tier 8 premium battleship, the Lenin. World of Warships Blitz is currently in version 3.0 and there are 11 Tier 8 battleships. 7 of the 11 are premiums. So what makes the Lenin unique? Why introduce another Tier 8 battleship? Well, the Lenin is the only Tier 8 battleship with 9 main guns in the front. It has a 14% chance of setting fire, which is the highest among Tier 8 battleships. But you might not want to use HE rounds because the Lenin has the strongest individual AP round in its class. It doesn't have the highest salvo damage, but it does have the highest AP round damage. So this is the equipment that I'm using. Main battery shell dispersion, acceleration, and steering. This is my commander setup. After testing many different setups, this is my favorite and here's why. For the Tier 3 commander skill, I chose Artillery Maintenance Expert to increase main battery traverse speed and reduce shell dispersion for 2 reasons. First, at the beginning of a match when you don't know where the enemies are, you need your main guns to be ready to engage with enemies as soon as possible, because ideally you want to initiate the firefight and land your rounds first. That's going to give you an edge by being the first one to deal damage and the first one to be reloading for another salvo. And second, the main gun rounds have horrible dispersion at long range, so when you start a battle, you need as little dispersion as possible or you're not going to deal very much damage. For the Tier 5 and 7 commander skills, I chose Fire Supremacy and Marksman, because precise aim is extremely important for a ship with dispersion issues. Hopefully the developers buff the Lenin by reducing shell dispersion in the future, but for now it isn't good, so you'll benefit tremendously by adding a third precise aim, increasing the duration, and reducing the cooldown time. For Tier 6, I chose Generalist for more survivability rather than Exploit Weakness for more fire damage, because I can deal far more damage by surviving than I can with 1% increased fire damage. For Tier 9, I chose Demolition Expert because I love taking out enemy main guns. For Tier 11, I chose Armor Piercing because the Lenin has the strongest AP round damage in Tier 8, so why not? But just to be sure that this was the right choice, I experimented with both HE penetration and AP penetration and adjusted my playstyles for each. And I found that I was doing more damage in matches with an AP commander setup than HE. For Tier 12, I chose Horizontal Protection Expert to increase my survivability. So now I'm going to rank this ship by using a spreadsheet that I made with performance numbers that are based on my equipment setups, historical camouflage, and elite bonus options. The Lenin is tied for last place for hit points, number 6 for survivability percent totals, number 9 for top speed, number 7 for acceleration, number 5 for turn time, number 11 last place for main gun reload time, number 8 for main gun range, number 3 for main gun fires per minute, number 5 for main gun HE DPS, number 6 for main gun AP DPS, number 6 for secondary gun DPS, number 7 for total DPS, number 10 for anti-aircraft damage, and number 3 for surface detection. I remind you that these rankings are not for the base ships, but the fully equipped ships, so that the ranking system is more practical and relevant to reality. Now what these rankings reveal is that the Lenin has the lowest amount of hit points, the longest reload time, the second lowest anti-aircraft damage, and is one of the bottom 3 slowest ships. The Lenin's acceleration is a little slower than average, but its turn time is a little faster than average. The main gun and secondary gun damage per second is average for both HE and AP. The total DPS, combining main and secondary guns, is lower than average by 89 points per second. The Lenin is in the bottom half for main gun range, but in the top half for concealment. Its survivability percent totals are average, but what these rankings don't reveal is that the Lenin has a really nice fire and flooding resistance. At a whopping 20%, the fire and flooding resistance is better than 8 of the other Tier 8 battleships. Last but not least, the Lenin is in the top 3 for main gun fires per minute. But as I said earlier, I found that I dealt more damage per match by using AP than HE, even when I used the optimized commander setups and playstyles for each. So now let's watch some gameplay and see how this ship performs in real situations. This is a Tier 8, Tier 9 match and I'm teamed up with 2 of my fleet members. You're going to see how this ship performs against a Baltimore, Maya, Izumo, North Carolina, Kiev, and Enterprise. First up is the Tier 9 Baltimore, an American cruiser. It was difficult to get a good first shot on this guy because the target lock kept switching to the Zumo behind him, but luckily it worked out. I want you to notice two things here. First, I'm becoming a harder target to hit by turning to face directly toward the Zumo and Maya. This is a great way to mitigate damage because of the enemy's shell dispersion. And second, notice how easily my main guns traverse to the left side of my ship. The Lenin has the fastest main gun traverse speed among Tier 8 battleships at 5.89 degrees per second, and they rotate toward the front of the ship rather than swinging around the back. That allows you to maintain offensive capabilities when you have to quickly turn your ship and traverse your guns to the other side. It's also nice that the secondary guns traverse at 16 degrees per second, so you can usually get your secondary salvos off before you lose your shot. I shot 6 rounds here at the Maya from 7.7 kilometers. 5 of the 6 hit. The shell dispersion looks nice at first, but it is really unreliable from battle to battle and in different situations. Here's an example. Watch the first salvo of 3 rounds. The dispersion looks great. But watch the next salvo of 3 rounds. Much different than the first one. Now watch these next 2. They are both fired at the back of the Izumo, but one salvo hits the front and one hits the back. The Izumo is a humongous ship, so that's a massive amount of dispersion coming from 2 main guns that are right next to each other, aimed at the same location, and fired at relatively the same time. The solution to this is firing salvos at ships that are showing broadside, like this North Carolina. Notice how the dispersion at only 7 kilometers is about half the length of the North Carolina. Because of that wide dispersion, it's much harder to land a lot of rounds on ships that are not giving you much broadside. That's also why you have Precise Aim 3. But even with Precise Aim 3, the dispersion doesn't change much. This shot on the Izumo is 8.5 kilometers with Precise Aim, but the dispersion is still bad for what you'd expect. The Alabama does far better than that with a lesser precise aim and a less optimal main gun layout. Now check out this Tier 9 destroyer, the Kiev, coming in on my right side. Here you'll see the speed in which the Lenin is able to turn to prepare to dodge torpedoes. Notice that my main guns were able to traverse fast enough to get that salvo off before I lost the opportunity to catch him broadside. That's extremely useful for a battleship, but unfortunately the Lenin is just too big to dodge torpedoes in situations where smaller battleships wouldn't have a problem. So now let's see how it does on a 12.5 to 13 kilometer shot on an Enterprise while using Precise Aim 3. I think I could have landed 2 more rounds if I aimed a little higher, so that's my mistake, but that's what the dispersion looks like. Honestly, that's the kind of dispersion I was expecting without Precise Aim, not with Precise Aim, so I'm disappointed by it. That said, the dispersion isn't always bad, like when I fired at this Myoko at 6.5 kilometers.
Precise Aim activated.
That was much better than the dispersion at 7.5 kilometers in the previous match. But still, take a look at the dispersion when firing main guns one at a time. The dispersion looks great from the first gun, but what's going on with the second? What is that? How is it even possible for rounds to disperse that poorly in such a short distance? It's too unreliable. Here's another great example of the dispersion. The first salvo is with Precise Aim, the second without it. Do you see the difference? With, without. With, without. Now here's a very common situation. Cruisers coming into the middle of the encounter map at the beginning of a match. One of the easiest ways to get a nice salvo at the beginning. Look at the dispersion though. Even with Precise Aim, rounds land in front and behind the ship. That's not good. But here's the very next salvo, still on the same Precise Aim as a second ago. That looks much better. And yet it's over 2 kilometers further than before. 7 rounds hit instead of 5. The Lenin certainly performs well in certain situations, but overall I don't like it because I can't carry in it. It gets beat up too easily and isn't reliable. It's also frustrating when I see ships that don't have precise aim getting way better dispersion than the Lenin with precise aim. And precise aim 3 at that. Like this North Carolina. Its dispersion is near perfect despite how far away it is, and yet it doesn't have precise aim. That's what the Lenin's rounds need to look like from that distance. I don't want to make the Lenin look completely bad though, because it is playable, but it performs like a support ship. Here's a random example of torpedo baiting just to show that it can do it. I'm reversing as bait. As soon as the Akatsuki turns broadside to launch torpedoes, I start moving forward to dodge them.
Enemy torpedo spotted.
So what's my recommendation? Well, after 33 battles, my win rate is surprisingly the same as the Alabama, but my average damage is 6,000 lower. And the biggest difference of all, I actually enjoyed the Alabama. To be as honest as possible with you, I didn't enjoy the Lenin at all, and I have no intention of playing it again unless it is buffed. If I was going to buy or earn a tier 8 premium battleship, I'd get the Roma, because that's my favorite ship in the game. I bought the Roma on my personal account and I love it so much, it's one of my most played ships of all time. Other than the Roma, I recommend the Alabama as well. So my honest recommendation is to pass on the Lenin because I found it frustrating and buy the Roma or Alabama instead. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more content, and I'll catch you guys next time.